What's going on, guys? It's Red Bull Tanker, and welcome back to Historical Board Gaming's The Korean War. This is turn 6, and we have quite a bit to go over, so let's get going. All right, first off, to the calendar. Turn 6. We are in the months of April and May, 1951. And over to the North Koreans. All right, so the North Koreans had 41 to spend. They spent 6 to repair the damaged factory, and then bought 5 infantry, 4 artillery, and 4 supplies. Combat. Seeing that I had made a mistake on my turn, especially with the failed attack on Incheon and not having the army in Osan properly supplied, Airsoft Commando ran with my mistake, and he definitely scored some big points. All right, first, up here in Chuncheon. Whoops. Oh, Lord. 1 second. All right, so up here in Chuncheon, where the U.S. had their landing force, Airsoft Commando attacked with 3 infantry, 4 artillery, 5 tanks, and a fighter. After 1 round of combat, he managed to kill... Come back over here. So, in 1 round of combat, he killed 5 U.S. infantry, a mech, an artillery, and a tank. The loss of the infantry included the entire 2nd Infantry Division and 2 regiments of the 1st Marine Division. The North Koreans lost only 3 infantry and an artillery, and in gaining the territory, Airsoft Commando captured a lone Allied supply token in Chuncheon as well. So now the 1st Marine Division's marker has moved to the last remaining U.S. Marine Regiment here in Korea at Sonju. I will say, I can't remember what regiment he is in, but we will say that this is the regiment being commanded by Chesty Puller, the great Marine commander. So his regiment is all that is left on the Korean Peninsula. Second battle for the North Koreans, his attack on the 8th Army here in Osan against General Walker and his U.S./UN army there. This battle went 3 rounds. Airsoft Commando went in with 4 infantry, 5 artillery, 6 tanks, and a fighter. After 3 rounds of combat, he was able to kill 6 infantry, 2 artillery, and 4 tanks at a loss of 4 infantry and 5 artillery, leaving him with 6 tanks here in Osan. The U.S. divisions wiped out in Osan include the 1st Cavalry Division, the 25th Infantry Division, and the 1st Armor Division. So the U.S. has lost a significant bulk of the historical units that fought in Korea, leaving only a small handful left, which means I will eventually have to dig into my box of division markers and pull out some new units to send to Korea, as this has been a major setback for the Allies, and in all honesty, probably a couple months sooner has probably led to the firing of General MacArthur. So we will say that General MacArthur has been fired, and General Matthew Ridgway has been named commander of UN forces in Korea. All right, then at the end of the turn, Airsoft Commando, his only non-combats were to bring his fighters back to Seoul. He deployed his purchases into Seoul itself, and then at the end of the turn, the North Koreans collected 41 IPC. China, to no surprise, China had 10 IPC. They bought another fighter. So China now has 5 fighters up there in the north, and are very much ready and willing to come into the game. And then at the end of the turn, There was no non-combats. He deployed, and at the end of the turn, collected 10 IPC. Excuse me. All right, coming down to South Korea, seeing the emergency that the Allied powers are in. The South Koreans had 17 IPC. They bought 5 infantry and 2 supply. They did not launch any combat. They just consolidated most of their infantry here in Sonju, awaiting to see what these 6 enemy tanks may attempt to do. Other than that, they deployed the 5 infantry and 2 supply here in Busan and collected 17 IPC. Alright, for the U.S., as always, had 50 IPC to spend. They bought 6 mechs, 3 tanks, and 8 supply. The mechs are being flagged under the 40th Infantry Division and the 45th Infantry Division. Now, this, like I said, this will now clear out the tokens for the historical units that fought in Korea, and now every division marker now laid is a unit in this alternate history that did not fight in Korea. And then the 3 tanks are being flagged under the reconstituted 5th Armored Division. Combat. The U.S. only had 1 combat. As always, they took their strategic bomber and air force from Busan, came up here to Seoul. The overwhelming aircraft led Air Staff Commando to not scramble, considering it was like, it's like 5, it was like, oh yeah, no, it was 4 fighters and a jet against these 2 fighters. The bomber made it through the flak, but sadly only scored 3 hits. Not a good run for the U.S. U.S. Air Force on this day. Non-combats. They moved the bulk of their Busan forces here to Wigwang, along with supplies. Like I said, Chesty Polar and his Marine Regiment moved from Andong over here to Sonju to back up the South Korean infantry forces here. And then the Air Force moved back to a new base here in Wigwang. The U.S. fleet came out of C-Zone 6, came back to C-Zone 5 to consolidate their power, especially considering that events are about to change that could potentially put the fleet at risk. So we moved the fleet back to keep it safe. And then the 3rd Infantry Division with its armor and supply landed at Busan along with the strategic bomber. When the fleet moved back, it allowed the tactical that the U.S. bought to deploy right onto the carrier. So the U.S., I think this is the Midway. Yes, the USS Midway has 2 tactical bomber squadrons on it for air support. And then at the end of the turn, the U.S. collected 50 IPC. The UN purchased 5 mech this turn. They did not conduct any combat. Using the transports, they non-combated their 2 infantry up to Choan, and then their tank moved 2 up to Choan, and then the mech with supplies just moved here to Daejeon. Just want to be careful with how we want to stack supplies and everything here in Choan, given that it is still looking maybe a little iffy here. And then I guess I don't know if I said in this attack, but yeah, obviously too in the Battle of Osan, the UN did lose an infantry division along with its artillery support. I guess we will say that these units belonged to, let's see, we'll say they belonged to the British contingent. So the British contingent has lost infantry, has lost its infantry and artillery in the disaster at Osan. To which the Prime Minister of Great Britain, I think it was Churchill at the time, is very displeased, which also helped lead to the firing of General MacArthur. As we all know, Churchill still holds much sway with the world governments. Not to mention Truman not getting along with MacArthur as well. All right, and then on the non-combat, other than that, they brought in their 2 infantry, mech, and tank from the build chart, along with the 4 supplies. And then at the end of the turn, the UN collected 20 IPC. All right, well, now on to some news, because another turn has ended and Seoul is still in North Korean hands. This now means that Seoul has been occupied by the North for 3 consecutive turns, which now means that China has officially entered the game, seeing that their northern brethren have made significant gains against the South and against the U.S., against the West and its puppet regime in the South. The Chinese have decided that it is time to throw their weight into the scales to help finish the conquest of the peninsula. So China is now in the game. I await Airsoft Commando's message to tell me where his 15 hidden Chinese infantry are here in the north, so they can be put on the board and he can start moving them south, along with moving the rest of the Chinese forces south as well. Again, kind of like what I went over in the introduction, the only way for the U.S. to really try and halt the movement of Chinese forces out of China into Korea is to try and bomb the bridges here on the Yalu. And as you can see, though, the Allies are not in a position to accomplish that. So China is definitely going to have some free reign moving their troops south to the parallel and beyond to fight their capitalist enemies. Going over to the territory charts, with the recapture of those 2 territories, the Allies have gone down to 14 territories, while the North sits at 23. And over on the build chart, South Korea moved down to 17. North Korea moved up to 41. China will move up to 35. However, they will still only have 10 to spend at the beginning of this turn, but then we'll get the full 35 for the next. So the Allies have some trouble, definitely have some trouble coming their way. All right, well, that is going to be it for turn 6, and we will see you guys next time for turn 7. Let's see how exciting this gets. So until then, guys, as always, take care.